my prediction, you haven't heard this from Fannie Mae, you haven't heard it from Freddie Mac, you haven't heard it from anybody. We're going to break 7% interest loans this year. And if we start thinking about 8 and 9% and what that does, that's where you have massive disruption. 7%, I think, you're going to see a lot of crickets this winter in terms of buyer demand, which kind of, resets the balance of what we're dealing with low inventory. And that's how he's going to attack. The Fed always talks about housing. This is nothing new. If anything, it is a one sentence footnote when he has a talk like he had this week, when they have a meeting. It is very small. He'll talk about the broader markets for sure, but he rarely goes this deep and aggressive at housing. He went on a whole soliloquy that housing is going to have to be torn down before it gets better. I mean, and, people were, kind of matching up what number of price declines that would mean. Would that mean 20%? Would that mean 30%? Of course, many markets have gone up 40%. So in my calculations, housing, you're still going to be in a gain especially if you're locked into 2.5% interest rate. Don't to Pat's, what we were talking about before the show, don't go jumping off that cliff. If you bought a house 2 years ago, you're locked into 2.5%, 3%, 3.5% interest, and you're still going to be up from where you bought it. You'll be fine. But yeah, he definitely went hard in the paint on the housing market. That also was my number one takeaway. Number two, Pat, he also mentioned something. He kind of slipped this one in there. He talked about employment. And so obviously the difference and the reason why there was some people arguing that we're not in a recession because employment is so strong, right? That was the big theme a couple of months ago. We're not in a recession because employment is so strong. That's the big difference here. We have employment, we have no unemployment issues, and we have rising wages. Well, he mentioned employment and he said, now we're never going to say we don't want people to be working, but we will disrupt employment, meaning we will put people on the unemployment line if it means getting to 2% inflation. Given the choice, Jerome Powell said in plain English that we would rather see Americans be laid off than not get to 2% inflation. He would take inflation going down and more people losing their jobs than the reverse. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you're going to run into, you're going to have employment fallout at this point, right? Because things like if inflation starts to actually come back into something that resembles in control,
but you're going to have it caused by the Fed.
I don't know how they're going to do that. I heard that, like, obviously, yeah, I read the notes, I read the actual takeaway. I don't understand. I don't know that I fully recognize if it's an action of theirs where there's a targeted game plan to do it, or whether he's simply saying, I'm willing to accept the fallout of this happening. Because I don't understand, like, I'm not smart enough by any means to understand how economic policy from the Fed and an interest rate move will impact you hiring a new office staff member, right? Other than costs, which is inflation based, which is the opposite of what they're doing. Right? So like, I haven't yet figured out, I understand he's willing to accept it. And you're right. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see people driven out of jobs. But I think because of inflation, I think because of cost of goods, I think because of people slowing down and consumer spending reducing and these margins starting to come back down again. And we're actually starting to go into a recession more than because of the Fed. Like, I don't understand again how he's going to directly impact that.
It was just interesting. And that's why it's only my second takeaway that he went that far as to say, yeah, I'd rather see people on the unemployment line than us not get to 2% inflation. To your point, I do see a clear path of how he is going to disrupt the housing market, of how he's going to take some of the gains on people's homes away. And that one's pretty clear. I mean,